Hi again, it's Quilting Nerd, and following requests from some of you I received in the last weeks, I wanted to show you today how I am quilting a bit larger quilt. It's actually a quilt. It's a bigger twin size, but I work on it since such a long time, and actually I embrace the idea that I can combine two very useful projects. Let me tell you a little bit about the quilt. The quilt is a very nice project. It consists of equilateral, so 60-degree triangles. Some of them are cut from strip units and some were cut from background fabric. And as you can see, I already did some quilting, and in the strip units I'm using a green thread that it's very nicely merging with all the colors, and I'm just using straight lines. So here I just echoed the diamond shape. Here I have lines, and here I have lines going in other direction. In the background I selected different feather like elements. So that's the problem with when I want to film my normal projects, because there I'm using really contrasting thread. I still hope that I can sell some of my quilts, and contrasting thread is not for everybody. And then I am actually, here you can see a different feather. Let me show you that one here. Or I want to give them as presents. Wedding presents are always perfect as a quilt. Quilts are always perfect presents for weddings. So here you can see different feather element. And how do I do that on a domestic machine? Of course, my domestic machine is on the larger side, but I know many of you have just slightly smaller models, and I used such ones before. You can see I have really tiny space. That's it. That's all I have. Here is window to the door to the balcony, and that's it. That's stopping. And here I can quilt actually a quilt size quilt. So it's possible. But what do I have to help me with this task is I am using the fact I have a wall behind my machine, so my quilt cannot slip and pull with the whole weight while I'm quilting. That would be very bad. On the other side, because there the quilt can slide on the side of the sewing table, I'm using this little clamp thing, and it's holding my quilt, so the weight is not dragged down. And it's actually a very useful tool that costed a few euro. It was not very expensive, and it works beautifully. And there, as you can see, I have tons of light and holder for my camera, because that's also my YouTube working space, and good light is anyway good for sewing. I hope the little side light will help me to show you how I quilt with neutral color thread and how the whole process looks like. Another important thing, I am not spray basting my quilts, because we shift our quilts mechanically under the needle, and there is always, the fabric is always shifting a little bit. And I noticed that for me spray basting never worked, because I always had wrinkles and puckers forming. And actually I am not using many pins. That's my distance here. So it's more than spread of my hands. It's more than, I would say it's about 10 inches apart from one pin to the next. I just use enough of them that it holds my sandwich together. Here the friction is not enough, but I still can move the excess fabric before I will start quilting within this area. And because I always start from the middle, so half of this quilt is already quilted, now I'm starting on the other quilt, on the other half. I start from the middle, and then I will try to move it away from the frame of the machine, and then this way I will have always less and less unquilted sandwich on this side. And then I will pull it back on my lap because that's the way I prefer it. There are people that prefer to push it away, and I will do the same. I will move back to the middle and move to the side. And today I wanted actually to show you how I quilt the background fabric and what kind of motif I selected for the stripe unit. And then this way you can see that this quilting process looks slightly different from my standard videos because it's even slower, and I make much more often breaks to smooth the fabric to avoid forming wrinkles and puckers both on top and at the bottom. Sometimes it happens and I don't think it's a big deal, but I take it as a personal victory if I can quilt a quilt without such events happening. So see you in a moment. This time I'm zooming a little bit out so you can see more of the action happening in the background. As always, starting by pulling the bottom thread up and securing it with few stitches. I'm using a neutral color thread. Hopefully it will be visible when I quilt. That's usually one of the main reasons why I never do that, because I use less contrasting threads on quilts. I don't know where their home is yet. For my own, sometimes I will use a bit more contrasting thread, but also I use patterned fabric in my quilts, and then the quilting is not that visible anyway. So now you can see why there is this difference between the standard quilting and the quilting I am filming. It's more about creative side of the quilting, or getting loosened up, understanding the movement, the pattern, the texture. And believe me, if you can quilt such elements that can be extremely decorative also for home use as pillows or wall hangings, then quilting such larger patterns on a quilt are actually not so difficult. So I skipped a stitch. That means my foot is a little bit too high. Most of the time I'm using needle size 90 actually, because, or 80. It's titanium coated needles because they last a little bit longer. And I'm using actually a thread that looks almost white, but it's a slight, very light teal color. So what I'm doing now, I'm minimizing the size of my quilting area. As you can see, it's quite large. Just a little bit of dot to dot. Yeah, the stitches are visible. And what I will do here actually, I am torn between a symmetrical feather or the feather that just goes from here to the top double one. I think I will go with a symmetrical feather. So I have to go back to the middle, and for that the ruler is perfect. And again, I skipped a stitch, so a bit lower. So, and now I can start with the central plum, because again the area is large and I like the symmetry. I would go with this ruler. No, it is a bit small. I would like to have a bit more curvature. So I found my ruler, one that it's fitting here very nicely, and I just need it for the central plum. I like it when it's nice and symmetrical. If I can, I am just working with straight ruler on a large quilt, eventually using arches, because, and then I tend to use smaller rulers. The reason for that is that you need some force and energy to move the quilt with the ruler in one smooth movement. And sometimes this is also not working. This is the disadvantage of working with sewing machine sometimes. So if I have a smaller ruler, I try to keep my motifs where I use it also small, so I can shift it in one go without worrying about repositioning. And you can see this is not as dense as my other quilting that you already know, but it's dense enough to give me a very nice texture on the quilt. And because I have this nice space, I can move it for example this feather plum. I didn't have to reposition my hands, despite the fact it's relatively large. Now I can do the same back. You can see here it's really more the shadow of quilting, because the thread blends so well with the fabric. I love contrast quilting, but I also love just a hint of texture in my quilts, because it will become visible when it's laying on bed or it's when it's hanging on the wall. It's simply not so good for video filming. So now let's repeat that on the other side. First some dot to dot quilting. when you position your ruler always with this 1/4 inch offset. And you can see here I was getting a little bit unstable because I moved with my other hand a little bit too far. And because I was already traveling here 3 times, I will now go up on the other line. I go slow because I have to shift the fabric with my right hand and keep the ruler stable with my left while moving also the fabric. And now I can finish the feather on the other side. The concept for this quilt is that each row of the background diamonds gets its own type of feather-like element, or quilting with feather elements. And the stripe units are getting some variations of straight line quilting. It still gives me uniform look at the end, but it allows me to find what I like to quilt the most. Every project I do, it's kind of experiment and learning opportunity. Maybe when I will quilt another 100 quilts, I will be like, okay, let's just do this motif and it will look fine. But for now, I like to mix, vary, experiment, check different combinations. It's fun. Okay, now the other side. So, practical advice, right now my hands are way too far away from the needle. So even if I just have this one tiny element, I stopped, I will readjust my sandwich. Smoothing is more like, right now not that necessary because the other elements are already quilted, but it's just a habit now, so I always do that. So this element is now done, and I will repeat it in all the other elements in this row. But I wanted to show you still, so I will actually move here to the element with the stripes. And at first I will change the thread color to more contrasting green. Using thread that is similar in color to your fabric is a very wise strategy, because even if you are not experienced quilter, if you're not a master, which you don't have to be to start quilting your own quilts and bring joy to your kids and grown children and even your husband, whomever you want to see. Now this part is a little bit too thick and I cannot move it under, so I will move it a little bit. So I have to now lift the foot a little bit so I can shift it this first few millimeters. That's the problem with the ruler foot on a quilt top, is that sometimes you have thicker places where several seams meet, and usually I avoid them if I can, but in this case it's not possible. I have to meet here, so then I will lift my foot just a little bit. I will move my sandwich, cut the threads, and then lower it back again where it was, because if it's too high we will start skipping stitches. So here I will just make relatively dense dot to dot quilting, and the thread, it's pretty bright green actually, and it shows very nicely on some fabrics, but it disappears in the other, and that's like almost the maximum what I can do with this ruler and on this machine, aiming for the other end. You can see I have to readjust and take a look where is my seam line and where is my quilted line and where is my ruler. Check that it's parallel, then I will have no problems, and try not to move the fabric under, because then I will have some offset line. And you can see I have to readjust the back of the quilt. So here I didn't catch the end, but it's okay, because anyway that would be too difficult to quilt over it. And now I will just repeat it on the other side. Because quilting with ruler is so much slower, for me at least, than the free motion quilting, most of the time I use rulers sparingly. Because I want to be done sometime with my quilt, and this one already takes too long. So lots of checking and making gymnastic, looking under the machine that my ruler is aiming correctly. The offset is very difficult to judge if the distance is still far away. For example, now I twisted it, I have to readjust it. It will be not perfect, but it will be quilted, and because the thread is not contrasting that much, someone would have to look very, very precisely to find the small inaccuracies. And if they look for it, then I don't care, then they can also find them. See that there are certain directions and way that I hold the ruler that the process is a bit faster, but it's not always possible to achieve that when you are quilting a large quilt. The possibilities of rotating it are limited. So here you are really forced to learn the different motifs and how to quilt them while changing directions, because I cannot rotate my quilt, at least not such large one, so easily, and I wouldn't like to do that because then the layers are shifting too much. I rotate it the moment the 1/4 of the quilt is done. As you remember, I quilt always from the middle, 1/4 at a time, then I take the quilt out, check the back for wrinkles, and then I put it back again. And because I'm filming so much of and quilting also other projects, the quilt is taken out more often than it's under the machine. And yeah, quilting with rulers, it's a hassle. I still like the look, I just don't like the process. And I decided for this look and this style, and now I have to stick to it. Next time I will quilt on the shorter side. Okay, let's try from this side. So honestly speaking, I'm not sure when next time I will use a ruler with this kind of frequency on a next quilt. Let's go back. I skipped to learn to stitch there. So this is pretty big block, this diamond, and it's almost too large for my comfort to quilt in one go. So that's part of the reason why I struggle a little bit. But again, that's something I learned while quilting this quilt, so I couldn't have known before. So now I have to finish it. I have to take extra time and be slow and patient. And next time I will do it differently. I will be not picking out the stitches here. There is no reason for that. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I take out the stitches, but it's only when I by accident go completely off the rail with my needle, or the machine starts skipping too many stitches, and then it's not about the looks but about the I simply am afraid that the stitches will come apart if I will not correct that. But beside that, I do not. So that's the last one. Yay! So I will have two more variations in my videos. One will be that from time to time I will be showing you how do I quilt large quilts and how do I quilt their different blocks to create secondary patterns. The other one I will from time to time use my very small machine. So now you have it. Looks very good despite the fact that there are some imperfections, but you have to look extremely close to see them. The texture looks great and it contrasts very nicely with the background pattern. And that was the point, as the stripe units contrast in color and their construction with the background units. And like that, I will now switch back again to my more neutral color, and I will fill the other ones, and I will continue smoothing, feeling for the wrinkles on the back. Sometimes it happens, and then I would simply grab in the bottom and pull it straight as well. And then I will move on with quilting this very, very beautiful and modern quilt. And I hope to see you soon.